Welcome to Universal Talk. On today's show, we ponder exopolitics, energy medicine, and the positive future. Let's present the case. First, we must consider the possibility that we might not be alone in this universe. One of the Pope's astronomers just recently made a statement: any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul. When he was asked, would he baptize an alien, he replied, only if they asked. And that's from The Guardian. The next thought to ponder is, what is energy medicine? And finally, what is all this talk about the 2012 phenomenon and a positive timeline? Well, what if ETs did exist? What if they looked so much like us that they actually walked amongst us? How many species could there possibly be? What if energy medicine could be actually used today to heal others? Is this how Jesus healed people? Is this how current priests and other healers even today heal individuals through what they call the laying on of hands? And what if there was truly a 2012 scenario to occur? How would we prepare for such an event? Many prophecies that have been documented, including the Holy Bible, speak of an end-time scenario. Is it possible that this could be that time? In a moment, we will have Dr. Alfred Webre on the show. For those of you who may not know Alfred yet, he is the chairman of the Board of Advisors of Mars, the leading exopolitical theorist and activist. He is considered to be the founding father of the field of exopolitics as a social science discipline. Through working at the Stanford Research Institute, he directed a proposed ET communication study project for the Carter White House in 1977, which evolved into his book, Exopolitics: Politics, Government, and the Law in the Universe. His extensive bio is available on his website at www.exopolitics.com. He also authors a column for the PhiladelphiaExaminer.com. Dr. Alfred Webre, welcome to Universal Talk.
Joe, you know, I'm very, very happy to be with you here and to join you. I'm actually speaking with you cross-continent from Vancouver, Canada.
That's awesome. So can you tell the listeners and the viewers here who may not know about you a little about your history that brings you to this place right now?
Well, I was actually the general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of New York City toward the end of 1972, when I saw and began to read in books having to do with parapsychology, things like Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And I saw that there was something beyond what the Newtonian physics view of the world really had to offer, and what my education, even though I'd had the best of educations in the best of schools, had given me up to that point. So I sought out experts, in particular a professor at Rutgers University, who was an expert in parapsychology and also in extraterrestrial studies. And by the middle of 1973, I had already published my own book, which was published by G.B. Putnam's, and it was published in the U.S. and in Canada. It was also translated into Japanese and published in Japan, and that set out some basic theories about extraterrestrial communication. One of the primary theories was that, yes, we live in a populated universe, and what we knew as the UFO phenomenon could actually be seen in terms of psychology as peripheral cueing, and that is when coming in with a stimulus at the periphery of human vision sort of over the course of 2 or 3 decades bringing the human race up to an awareness that we are not alone in the universe. So in that sense, the UFO phenomenon was like a psychological conditioner which brought us up to the present state where we are now, where if you look at the public opinion polls, a very rigorous one was the 2002 Roper poll, which found that 48% of adult Americans believe that extraterrestrials are visiting Earth now, and 75% of adult Americans believe that the government is covering up their presence.
Okay. So you mentioned your extensive education. So can you tell the viewers, like, what is your background and what you currently do today?
Well, I come out of sort of the classical tradition. I went to Georgetown Preparatory School and got the gold medal in Greek. And then I went to Yale Law School and was an honors graduate with a Bachelor of Science. And then I went to Yale Law School, where I was a Yale Law School National Scholar in International Law. And then I was a Fulbright Scholar in Montevideo, Uruguay, in international law. And I practiced with a very large international law firm, the largest international law firm in the world. And then I went into, I became more interested in the environment, and I became general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of New York City. And from there, I've sort of branched out into a career as an environmentalist, as a futurist. I was, as a futurist at Stanford Research Institute, I directed a proposed 1977 extraterrestrial communication study with the White House of Jimmy Carter on the campaign trail in 1976 against Gerald Ford. Jimmy Carter had promised to open up all the UFO and extraterrestrial files, which were then secret. So I took him at his word, approached the White House, got their approval, and started putting together the first civilian scientific UFO study on record. That was unfortunately stopped by the Pentagon in the fall, in October of 1977, who threatened SRI, threatened Stanford Research Institute that they would, quote, stop all of their contracts with SRI, which then amounted to about 25% of Stanford Research Institute's budget, or out of a $100 million budget. So my project got stopped.
Wow.
But I've since continued, and out of that experience, I developed the field of exopolitics, which is a new science, and it's the science of the study of relations among intelligent civilizations in the universe. And my book, Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and the Law in the Universe, which you can get on Amazon or at exopolitics.com, is now in its second decade. It's a worldwide book. I'm about to go down to South America. I'm lecturing at the University of Colima in Mexico at the Faculty of Science before 1,000 students on this subject, and down in Argentina at the International Ufological Conference, which is now entitled Journey Toward Exopolitics. Exopolitics was also nominated to be Word of the Year in 2005. So we're making broad inroads into the culture, and in this period of transition, as we move from a planet-centered society to a more galactic and universe-centered society.
Right. So do you find that different populations in different parts of the world are more accepting of this information?
I would say so. There are a lot of paradoxes here. Paradoxically, in the U.S., which is probably one of the societies in which the information is most censored, you have a very high acceptance among the population. And I just mentioned some of those figures. 48% of the adult population of the U.S. believe that extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth now. And that's because of the very active outreach that the extraterrestrials themselves have undertaken since the mid-1950s, despite the extraterrestrial embargo, which the U.S. government put into place in 1953. What happened is that in July of 52, there's a big flap and UFO flap, and UFOs flew right behind the U.S. Capitol in July 16th and throughout July of 1952. And then President Truman sent F-86 Sabre jets after them, and it was on the front page of the newspapers, and all kinds of stuff, kind of wars of the world. And there was no evidence that these objects were hostile. Rather, it was the U.S. which was hostile, which went into a fear reaction. So in 1953, the CIA convened a panel called the Robertson Panel, and that determined and set out a rule that from then on, any mention of UFOs or of extraterrestrials in the United States, in either the media, in academia, in education, in government, or elsewhere, had to be accompanied by ridicule, or else the person doing it would lose their career, be subject to ridicule, or in some cases murdered. And that was, in effect, putting a huge damper on the study of extraterrestrials and UFOs in the U.S. But despite that, the extraterrestrials have continued a very, very sophisticated and powerful outreach in terms of UFO sightings, so that Americans are, by and large, well educated about the extraterrestrial presence from the UFOs themselves. And in other parts of the world, for example, South America, there isn't the same sort of government crackdown or censorship on the UFO and extraterrestrial issue, so that one can speak openly about extraterrestrials and what are the extraterrestrials doing, and what are the Greys doing, and what are the Balans doing, and what are the Nordics doing, and what are the Orion people doing, and what are the Pleiadians doing, and what are the other people doing, and you can have a decent conversation. Whereas in the U.S., most of the conversation tends to be relatively shallow, and people who are really into it are into it in an in-depth way. And then you have a large part of the population still hypnotized by the official government propaganda, and they go into the giggle factor. So it's a real changing kind of theme. Now we seem to be coming into much more of an official disclosure. Just in the past few weeks, a major press conference at the National Press Club, officers and one enlisted person of the U.S. Armed Forces, that they had multiple encounters with UFOs that shut down U.S. missile silos in UK, sightings on UK missile bases. So this is backed up by 120 forward, so that this, I think, more of the major world. So we're starting to have something of a transition politics that really makes this possible. It's an opening the consciousness of the universal phenomenon, just making this happen, and that ties into energy medicine.
Right. We're getting a little bit of breakup here. I think via Skype, I think there might be a little bit of a delay, and we're losing some of the transmission here, but we're going to try to work through this here. So what would you say your stance is on extraterrestrials?
Well, the stance is actually quite simple, and that is that it's not that Earth is the only populated planet. It's quite the opposite. It's that we live in a populated and organized universe, and Earth has been quarantined up to this point, and we're about to be admitted or become aware that we are in a populated universe. So that's what our objective situation is. And so as an exopolitician or a practitioner of the exopolitical science, my job is to be as aware as I can of how relations among intelligent civilizations are structured, what the different types of intelligent civilizations are, what the secret programs are between the U.S. government and extraterrestrial civilizations. There are a number of them that have existed since at least the past 40 or 50 years. And so that we make these public, irrespective of whether the U.S. government wants to make them public or not, because they've been done with public funds. And because the U.S. government, these secret programs have now exceeded their constitutional prerogatives, and they are functioning on unconstitutional grounds through the unconstitutional use of black budget funds. So it's our duty as public interest advocates to do so.
Okay. So that leads me into the next question, or the next couple questions, which are why are they here and when did they get here?
Well, they were never not here. And there are many layers and many types of extraterrestrials. One way of looking at it is this. It's kind of the layers of an onion. And this came home to me when I was asked by Oxford University Press, which is a division of Oxford University, to write a book on extraterrestrial civilizations and the law, because I had to write a typology, a new typology of what extraterrestrial civilizations are. In anthropology, a typology would be all the different types of human beings, the different types of human species. You know, you can classify them by cranium types. In the question of extraterrestrial civilizations, there were a couple of typologies out there, one promoted by Dr. Michio Kaku that was based on energy. What type of energy devices do they have? But that wasn't very useful, because that isn't how the extraterrestrial civilizations describe themselves. Another typology was by Dr. Michael Salla, which said, well, are they aligned with the U.S. military-industrial complex? But that isn't very useful, because Earth is just one small planet in the middle of one solar system, in the middle of one galaxy, in the middle of hundreds of billions of galaxies in one universe, and we don't know how many universes there are in this multiverse. So we want something that is applicable to the entire multiverse. So what we discovered is that the way that extraterrestrial civilizations describe themselves is that they are based in dimensions. They're based in dimensions. They'll say, oh, I'm a Pleiadian from the 7th dimension. Just like I would say, oh, I'm an Earthling from the 3rd dimension. Now, what does the 3rd dimension consist of? It consists of the dimensions of time and space. Those are the dimensions that we, as our form of human being, an alien, kind of function in at this time. And so they are this planet is classified as what would be called a life implantation planet. That's, think of a garden, okay, and think of a gardener. Think of this planet as a garden. And think of all the life forms on this planet as cultivates, and we're one of those. So, you mentioned 2012, what's called Homo sapiens. About 97% of our DNA. All that means is that it hasn't been activated yet. 2012 means of a 270 million year cycle when new species suddenly appear and suddenly disappear. That could be, and this is all theory because we don't know, could be a time when our DNA gets activated, we become more capable, higher life forms, namely the extraterrestrials, in galactic and universe society as well.
Let me just stop for a second, Alfred, because I want to recap what you said. Because there's a delay and because we're missing some of the feed, the audio, I just want to recap. And I think what you said was that currently human beings are only using 97% of their, or only using 3% of their DNA, and therefore scientists are considering 97% of the human DNA junk. And basically, we just haven't learned to turn it on. We haven't evolved to that point. The same with the brain matter. We know that 8 to 12% is what's being used at this time. And what is the rest used for? And why aren't we using it? And I also think that you were mentioning something in the effect that there's a gap in between caveman to current human, and the scientists can't seem to find in the fossil records how we evolved from caveman to current human. So with these evolutionary cycles that we go through, and it's just the way the planets move in the solar system, and et cetera, the energies that come through the center of the universe may constitute another leap in evolution, and therefore turning on the rest of our DNA. So it will be from the possibility of the caveman to the current human to, I don't know what they would even call the next evolutionary leap, say superhumans, which they use 100% of their DNA and 100% of their brain. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. And so that's sort of the hopeful side of the future that lies before us. Radio transceivers, and we're a very complex system.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of that, do you think that that's how some of the psychics that are out there can kind of tap into this universal energy that's around and be able to predict future events or see, or know things that most people don't? Is it because they're not as tapped in, per se?
Yes, and in fact, there's a parapsychological model called psi-mediated instrumental response, PMIR. And that model holds that all conscious thought is mediated by subconsciously derived information, such that Everybody is doing this. When you, quote, accidentally meet a friend on a street corner and exchange valuable information, that meeting has in fact been subconsciously arranged by a vast unconscious psychic network that is in the collective mind. There's a very interesting insight, and that is that as a matter of science, mind may be a singularity. In the entire universe, there may only be one mind.
Mm-hmm. So that brings into question the 100 monkey rule. Have you heard about this theory?
Oh, yes. And what we posited was that because the exopolitics model came into being and was published in the year 2000, and in the year 2000, there was a tremendous acceleration of governments, etc., releasing all of the exopolitical information, that the 100th monkey syndrome had to do with the exopolitics model, but in fact was more universal than that, because the time acceleration matrix, this matrix that's derived from the singularity at the center of the universe, shows that in 1999, the galactic era began, and that's when the singularity at the center of the universe began to emanate waves of consciousness, of galactic consciousness, and that's when humanity's attention began to turn toward the galaxy and toward issues of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Mm-hmm. So that's when everybody's attention shifted that way. So that's the 100 monkeys. Mm-hmm. That actually comes from a universe process from the portal, the Stargate, at the core of our universe.
So basically the 100 monkey rule is something in the effect of, if you have two separated islands from water, and one island there are a number of monkeys living there, and they learn how to use a tool, and after they reach this tipping point of, say it's 100, then all of a sudden, by virtue of being tapped into this universal energy, this knowledge, this consciousness, if you will, another island that's separated from water, there's no way that these monkeys have any kind of communications. All of a sudden they start using the same tool automatically. Is that kind of what the 100 monkey rule is in your thought process?
Yeah, because knowledge and consciousness is non-local and it's non-temporal. In other words, we're all having these thoughts, this common thought, especially unity consciousness, outside of time and outside of place. Mm-hmm. And we're moving toward a frequency and dimension and awareness in our dimension that we call Earth, which is going to be increasingly outside of time and outside of place. It's not going to be as much in the third dimension, which is ruled by time and place, but our future will be much more telepathic, much more synchronistic. People will be, much more telepathically in tune. They'll be much more synchronistic. There'll be much more flow, and people who are tuned in that way will tend to evolutionarily thrive. So that's why it's important to let go of all of your baggage around this stuff and your fears, and let go of what the propaganda tells you, and really embrace the research around this area, because it relates to your own positive evolution.
Do you feel, and I'm just building on last week's show, that the mind-body connection is important to be in balance?
Yes, because we are in this dimension. We are an instrument of balance, and in order to have balanced perceptions and balanced thought, your mind and your body have to be in sync and have to be, you know, synchronized, and there are many deep reasons for that. There's the ancient Latin maximum, mens sana in corpore sano, and that is as true now and as forever. Probably that's why the forces that have tried to impede the evolution of the enlightened human species have turned to programs like MK Ultra and the use of mind control so as to impede the development of a sound mind. And they've turned to programs like genetically modified organisms and you know, depleted uranium and other toxins so as to try and impede healthy bodies among humans. So as a healthy human species, we really have to be alert and have to preserve both the health of our bodies individually and as a species, and of our minds individually, because there apparently has been that has tried to our success and our evolution potential on this planet.
Okay, just to recap, because we had you cut out a little bit there, you're saying that there are opposing forces that are preventing humanity from raising to their highest potential. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So we have about 10 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is maybe not get so much into the opposing force, just generally speaking that, you know, I think that brings back into the play the simplicity of good and evil, or the opposing forces. And most people, in most religions at least, believe that part of reality. But because we are limited with time here, what I'd like to do is move into the medicine, the medicine that you were talking about, the healing medicine or energy medicine, and talk a little bit about that, and whatever else you would like to get into. But maybe we could first get into that healing energy. Like, I know that you and I have gotten together and done some distance healing work, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I'm on the Northeast and you're in the Northwest. You're in Vancouver, Canada more specifically, and of course I'm in central Pennsylvania. So I'd like to know the healing work that I've done with you. What has your experience been with that?
Right. Well, it's again, you know, it's really very, very simple, and that is that all healing is fundamentally working to bring one's own vibration in synchrony with the vibration of the singularity at the core of our universe. And that is the vibration of enlightened unity consciousness. And when anything is out of sync with that vibration, we will go into an illness. And the point of energy medicine is that, since everything is energy, is to treat the body and the mind as an energy field. And since consciousness and energy are non-temporal and non-local, then Joe and I could and have, in fact, engaged in energy medicine exercises. For example, an exercise to raise the frequency of your own personal energy field, to be more in sync with the singularity at the core of our universe. And you can go, you can access that at universaltalk.info, or you can access that at exopolitics.com. It's a YouTube video, and scientifically, you're looking at that YouTube video, and you are, because the energy is outside of time and outside of space, you are accessing the same healing that we were accessing, because we were accessing it outside of time and outside of space.
Right. So instead of them having to have it, them pictured as, well, I missed that healing because it's not a live healing. Because it was recording, you still get the benefits.
Yes, yes, because all of these things are occurring on a non-local and a non-temporal basis. Now, this is traditionally very difficult for us to understand because we have been designed as creatures of space and time, but we're now shifting, and we're shifting into creatures where our DNA now will be more capable of sensing outside of space and time.
There's also some research that I've noticed that is out there in regards to frequency, and various people are researching by holding a certain hertz or frequency, they can heal certain illnesses or manipulate the DNA in such a way that heals a person as well. And not to mention Michael Tellinger's work from South Africa, who's touring the country, our country right now, United States, and all his findings with frequency and the new theories of how you know, some of these ancient civilizations moved these and created these monoliths, and which the cranes that we have today couldn't possibly lift some of the structures or the blocks that build these structures. And they're finding that by holding a certain frequency can actually levitate, if you will. But, I mean, have you heard this research as well?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, this is the basic physics of an advanced civilization that understands how to operate and manipulate inside our 3D physical world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe we could talk about the positive timeline with this 2012 phenomenon. You already mentioned a little bit about the Mayan calendar and the consciousness field and what's being emanated from the center of the galaxy. Can you briefly talk about the positive timeline?
Yeah, and I'll be very brief.
Okay.
We looked into a number of studies. There was a DARPA, Department of Defense study using time travel, chronovisor in 1971, that found Washington, D.C., the U.S. Supreme Court in 2013 under 100 feet of water. That was matched by a March 2010 remote viewing study using the largest number of military remote viewers ever assembled, that likewise found the U.S. Congress in 2013 under deep water, say 100 feet of stagnant water, and found a worldwide catastrophic scene, as though a planet X had, a brown dwarf had come through the solar system, and you had large meteors hit the Earth and worldwide flooding. And a destruction of all coastal cities. But at the same time, there was a cluster of 29% of the remote viewers that saw a completely positive future. And in fact, although we now know that there are at least 10 or 11 different points of evidence whereby the U.S. and the world elite are spending trillions of dollars to secretly build underground shelters, preparing for a worldwide catastrophe in 2012 to 2013, based on these 1971 secret studies that they did using time travel. We know, and we have now scientific evidence, that there's a positive timeline that has arisen. In other words, by locking into the waves of consciousness coming from the singularity at the core of the universe, one is actually vibrating at a frequency which takes one into an alternative future from the catastrophic future that the permanent war economy is preparing for. And that is that all of the finance, the Pentagon, all of that is spending trillions of dollars preparing for World War III. That's a reality that they've created, and that's a real reality for them. But there's an alternative reality which is scientifically at a different frequency. It's like almost two different realities. Mm-hmm. So all you have to do is put your consciousness on the core of the universe, and you shift over into the positive timeline, and you're actually in a different reality. Just go to exopolitics.com and you can read a series of 3 scientific articles, all based on experimental science, that shows why this is true.
Awesome. That's great. I want to thank you for being on the show, and of course we're going to have you back, because we just kind of scratched the surface of this whole thing. So is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with maybe a 30-second recap?
That we live in a time in which you really determine your own reality and your own future. And it's by you and your knowledge and your power to go for the good, the positive, the divine-oriented, and the positive timeline. That's what's going to determine the whole positive destiny of the earth. So go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want you guys to maybe tune into my radio talk show tonight from 8 to 10 Eastern Daylight Savings Time by logging on to www.universaltalk.info. We will be discussing the true meaning of unconditional love and compassion. And if you tune in, you'll hear more of what Alfred Webre has to say, myself, Laura Eisenhower, who is Dwight D. Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, and also Ramona Thon Iyer, who is from New Jersey, who is a psychic prophet as well. Thank you all for tuning into our show. If you like the show, dislike the show, any other questions or suggestions of content for future shows, email me at universaltalking@gmail.com. Or if you missed some of the show and would like to listen to the content or would like to refer a friend, simply log on to my website at www.universaltalk.info. And this is Joe Marra signing off for Universal Talk.